Hello, my name is Carla, and my history project proposal is on the Boeing 747 and the history of the Boeing 747 and how it came to be. I don't know, I've just found this really interesting because it's the airplane that changed the aviation industry for the better and has made such great impacts in the aviation industry. So, what is a Boeing 747? So, a Boeing 747 is a wide body commercial jet airliner aircraft that has four wing mounted engines and is used as both a passenger carrier and a cargo carrier. The 747 is also known as the jumbo jet and as the queen of the skies because of how big it is and because of the way that it changed the aviation industry. Something that makes the 747 so unique and distinct from other aircrafts is its hump that it has on the upper deck. So with this hump is used for or was used for is as a double deck configuration, and it was designed to be able to easily convert into a cargo carrier and as well as to serve as a first class cabin or to simply just provide extra seating for passengers. Now, if you're wondering how many passengers the 747 can carry, I've got the answer for you. So a three-class layout of the 747 can accommodate 416 passengers, while the two-class layout can accommodate 524 passengers, which is a lot. Here we have the technical specs of the Boeing 747, and these other 747s are actually variants that I will get into in the next couple of slides or a little bit further ahead. And these are airlines that flew and used the Boeing 747, which is a lot. They were mainly used in Asia and in Europe. Mainly Asia and Europe. Now on to the big question. Why the 747? Why was the 747 built? Well, during the 1960s, there was a growing worldwide demand for air travel, and Pan American World Airways founder Juan Trippe noticed that airports were just too congested due to an increase in flights. This issue inspired him to want to make an aircraft that could fit a lot of passengers and take them from one place to another all at the same time. That way, it would cut down on the number of flights and it would increase the airline's profit margins. Furthermore, this plane was essentially built to be able to fly nonstop from the United States to Europe and to other destinations in Asia without having to refuel the plane, as well as carry 4 times as many passengers as the Boeing 707, which was the plane that was being flown at the time. And because of the increased capacity of this plane, the costs of the plane tickets were lowered, and that made travel experience more accessible to middle-class travelers. So in the end, everyone was really happy about this. All right, so who was the person behind the design of the Boeing 747? So Joe Sutter was the chief engineer for the Boeing 747's development, and which was a request that Pan Am chief Juan Trippe requested of him. But who is Joe Sutter? So Joe Sutter was born in Seattle, Washington on March 21st of 1921, and he is, now best known for his work on the Boeing 747, which is where he would go on to make his name. He actually became involved with Boeing at a young age, as he started working there in the summer of 1940 while also studying aeronautical engineering. Joe Sutter also served in the U.S. Navy as part of the country's role in the Second World War, and because of this, it made him hot property for aerospace companies such as Boeing and Douglas interested in hiring him for their companies. He ultimately decided to work for Boeing and was also one of the people who was behind the production of the Boeing 707. During the production of the Boeing 747, Joe Sutter led a team of 4,500 engineers as part of the project. Before starting the project, Boeing had promised to deliver the 747 to Pan Am by 1970, which meant that since starting the project, they had less than 4 years to develop, build, and test the aircraft. Because of this, the 4,500 engineers had to work at an incredibly fast pace, and because of this incredibly fast pace that they were working at and how much progress they were making, they were actually given the nickname the Incredibles. Because the aircraft is also meant to work as a cargo carrier, to help load and unload the cargo, the cockpit was placed a little further back than normal so that the nose could be opened for easy cargo access. And initially, the space behind the cockpit was going to be used as a crew rest area, but Juan Trippe decided that he wanted to turn it into a cocktail lounge instead for the airline's premium passengers. Alongside Juan Trippe and Joe Sutter, aircraft manufacturer Pratt & Whitney agreed to work with Boeing on the design by agreeing to develop a high-bypass turbofan engine for the plane. This high bypass turbofan engine is known as the JT9D. As with any project, especially an engineering project, issues can arise while the production of them. And with the production of the Boeing 747, a couple issues and problems did happen to arise. Some of these issues were that the Pratt & Whitney engine was too high in fuel consumption. There was also premature removal rates and difficult inspections. The inspections were so difficult that they had to do inspections of first stage turbine blades every 100 hours and second stage every 200 hours with borescopes to find cracks. They also had to do inspections of outside fan rotor blades for cracks and inspection of diffuser case for cracks and first stage compressor status checks, which is just a lot of a hassle when it comes to this big plane and having to do it so routinely. Now, to be more specific with the fuel issue regarding the plane, the Boeing 747 was not at all fuel efficient as it had 4 engines, and then thanks to the Arab oil crisis and economic stagnation in the United States, this lowered the number of airline passengers and made it difficult for airlines to fill their new 747s. The Boeing 747's first flight was actually not a passenger flight, but it was a test flight. So on February 9th, 1969, the N7470, which is the Boeing's name, took off for the first time from Everett Payne Field, Washington, as hundreds of people gathered nearby and watched the plane take off for the first time. So the people piloting the test flight were Boeing Chief Test Pilot Jack Weigel. He was also accompanied by Engineering Test Pilot Brian Singleton Weigel and Flight Engineer Jesse Arthur Walick. The tests that were performed included a simulated loss of hydraulic power and recovery and various intentional cross-control maneuvers like the Dutch roll. Weigel was keen to the test and structural integrity of the aircraft engines, and he was concerned that the engines could suffer compressor stalls as the aircraft pitched skyward and might all do so simultaneously. While the engines and overall tests were fine, the maiden test flight was not without some turbulence. So when the 3 of them extended the flaps from 25 to 30 degrees, they felt the aircraft shake and vibrate immensely. So the lever was immediately moved back to 25 degrees, and Walick went to the back to investigate. When he returned from investigating, he announced that a section of flaps on the right wing had loosened, and the decision was made to end the test flight prematurely. But the N7470 was allowed to continue flying for a planned air-to-air photography with an accompanying Boeing 727. So although the Boeing 747's flight was cut short and only lasted 2 hours because of issues, it was still undoubtedly a success. So now for the moment we've all been waiting for, the Boeing 747's first passenger flight. So the Pan Am introduced its first 747 service on January 22nd, 1970, and it was originally scheduled for January 21st, but the inaugural flight was delayed when technical difficulties grounded the aircraft that had been slated to make the journey. So it was a second 747, originally named Clipper Victor. Yes, they named their aircrafts, but which Pan Am quickly named Clipper Young America, which carried 335 passengers and 20 crew members from New York's JFK Airport to London Heathrow on the first commercial flight of the 747. The 747's land in London was commemorated in a watercolor painting by John McCoy, part of a series celebrating historic first flights by Pan Am aircraft, and it's actually the picture that is on the left of this slide. It looks really pretty, and on the right of the slide are passengers in the Boeing 747. All right, so something pretty cool about the Boeing 747 is that different variants of the same plane were made. I am only going to be showing 8 pictures of these variants, but there are definitely a lot others out there. For the first slide of the variants, the plane on the left is the Boeing 747-100, which has 10 windows on each side of the upper deck lobe. And the one on the right is the 747 SR, which stands for short range, or the 747D domestic. It goes by either name. And this one is actually stationed at the All-Nippon Airway at Tokyo International Airport. For this next slide of the Boeing variants, the variant on the left is the 747-100B, and this one is from the Iran Air on approach to London Heathrow in May 2009. That's when this photo was taken. And the variant on the right is the 747SP, which stands for Special Performance, and you can tell it's significantly more different than the other Boeing variants. For the third slide of the variants, the variant on the left is the 747-200, and this one was flying for Egypt Air. And the 747 on the right is the 747-300, which is flying for Iberia, and it's significantly larger. Lastly, the 2 variants that I will be showing are the one on the left, the 747-400, and this one was flying for Virgin Atlantic and departing Manchester Airport in April of 2017. Now, the one on the left is the new of 747, which is 747-8, and which was actually launched in 2005, and this one was being flown by Nippon Cargo in August of 2015. I'm now going to be showing several photos that were taken of the Boeing 747 inside and outside of it that were pretty historic in moment and definitely made an impact. So in this slide, the picture on the left shows flight attendants serving first-class passengers with drinks and refreshments on board of the Boeing 747 on January 22nd, 1970, which is the first passenger flight of the Boeing 747, which is super cool. And on the right are passengers inside the Boeing 747. And in this flight, they were flying from Britain to New York. In this next slide, the photo on the left is a British Airways Boeing 747 jetliner that was flying over Prince Edward Road in Hong Kong on the approach of Kai Tak International Airport in April of 1990. The picture on the right shows people watching as the last Qantas Boeing 747 airliner prepares to take off from Sydney Airport to the U.S. on July 22nd, 2020. And this was actually also the downturn in the airline industry following travel restrictions that were imposed by the COVID-19 outbreak, which forced Qantas to retire the grounded 747s after flying with the Australian carrier for almost 50 years. For this last slide of the photos slideshow, this picture on the left is of old airplanes, which include the Boeing 747-400s, which is a variant of the Boeing 747, which are stored in the desert in Victorville, California, March 13th of the year 2015. And in the last year, there were actually 0 orders placed by commercial airlines for new Boeing 747s or the Airbus A380s, which meant that there was a fundamental shift in the industry towards smaller twin-engine planes and meant that they were more preferred than the Boeing 747s. And the picture on the right is a sad one, but it's the Boeing factory, which is where the last 747 jumbo jet was built in Everett, Washington of September 28th, 2022. So the Queen of the Skies brought air travel to the masses, but its half-century run is now coming to an end. As we have learned, the Boeing 747 is one of the most iconic aircrafts built. However, its status as an icon was unable to save it from its high costs, which is why airlines have began returning this model or selling them on due to the increased cost of operation. To back this up, former United CEO Oscar Munoz shared precisely why his company decided to retire the jet, and he explained that it had started to become a struggle to maintain, and ultimately the age of the type has reduced its efficiency across the board. Models such as the 777, the 787, the A330, and the A350 have become more effective options and have been replacing the Boeing 747 when it comes to long-haul services. Because of this, the market has progressed to allow narrow bodies to perform well on medium to long distances. Therefore, U.S. airlines don't have to rely on such powerhouses anymore, such as the Boeing 747 or the Airbus, for trips across the Americas or the Atlantic. To put into perspective the smaller narrow-bodied aircrafts, a 777-300ER can carry approximately the same number of passengers as the 747-400. Still, it burns 100,000 pounds less fuel, so the significant difference undoubtedly saves thousands of dollars per flight for operators of the aircraft. And adding to the demise of the 747 was the COVID-19 pandemic, which helped convince airlines to take their 747s out of service and replace them with new twin-engine wide-body planes. As I previously mentioned, in December 2022, the last Boeing 747 rolled off the production line after a run of 54 years. And during that time, Boeing built 1,574 747s, making it one of the best-selling aircrafts ever. And with that, I will be wrapping up my history project proposal of the Boeing 747. Thank you so much for sticking around. This was definitely more than 10 minutes, so I really apologize for that. But yeah, thank you so much for listening, and bye!